Welcome to my Corepunk Unstoppable Legionary Guide. Whether you're tanking for your group or exploring solo, this video will cover everything you need to master the Legionary, from abilities to talent builds, gear, and gameplay tips. Since Corepunk is in early access, some info might change, but this guide will give you a strong foundation to adapt to updates. Why play the Legionary? This class is a powerhouse of crowd control and survivability, perfect for holding the line in tough fights or even taking down powerful enemies solo. One of the most satisfying aspects of the Legionary is their ability to control the battlefield. Knocking enemies back with Shield Bash provides awesome moments in both PvE and PvP, whether you're breaking up enemy formations or creating breathing room for your allies. Spear Throw gives you a versatile ranged option, ideal for kiting enemies while setting up combos. Catapult is one of the most fun abilities in the game right now. You'll feel like a total boss hurling mobs into each other. And yes, you can throw your friends too. Just be careful not to accidentally launch your healer into a pit of enemies. Finally, the Legionary's ultimate turns you into an unstoppable juggernaut. For a few glorious seconds, you'll feel invincible as you charge through the battlefield, soaking up damage and dishing it out in equal measure. Let's check out the Legionary's abilities. Shield Bash. The Legionary strikes enemies with their shield, dealing physical damage. The impact knocks back enemies and makes them vulnerable for 5 seconds. If the ability hits an enemy casting a spell, it interrupts the spell and puts it on cooldown. Causes 130% aggro. This ability sounds pretty simple on the surface as a knockback. The important thing to remember is that it functions in a wedge shape, splitting apart enemies. This can be a double-edged sword on one hand, creates great openings to isolate priority targets, but on the other, it can make it harder to group up enemies for AoE attacks. The vulnerable debuff it applies is crucial as it synergizes with your other abilities, unlocking additional effects that can turn the tide of the battle. Catapult. The Legionary throws the nearest ally or enemy to a target area. All enemies in that area take target max health physical damage. The tossed enemy also takes damage and stuns all vulnerable enemies for 2 seconds within the radius. The tossed ally takes no damage. Causes 130% aggro. As I mentioned earlier, this is probably the most fun ability in the game. Throwing mobs is satisfying, but throwing players, even better. However, you need to use this carefully. You can accidentally dismount players or even interrupt their crafting. When used on vulnerable enemies, this ability stuns them, making it a key tool for crowd control. It also deals significant damage with a 130% threat modifier, making it excellent for generating threat. Spear Throw. The Legionary readies and throws a spear in a target direction. The throw gains extra range, damage, and mana cost the longer the Legionary spends prepping to launch the spear. It deals physical damage to all enemies in its path. The spear hits a vulnerable enemy, it taunts them, forcing them to attack the Legionary for 3 seconds. When you press this ability, a skill shot preview will appear, acting as both a targeting tool and a cast bar. The longer you charge it, the greater its range and damage. This ability also taunts vulnerable enemies, making it indispensable in group play for maintaining aggro and controlling the battlefield. Unstoppable. The Legionary removes all crowd control effects from themselves and applies a buff for 10 seconds. During the buff, the Legionary gains bonuses to movement speed and reduces incoming damage. For each target killed, or a target in which the Warmonger participated in the kill, they restore 10% of their missing health. The Legionary's ultimate, Unstoppable, truly lives up to its name. It provides massive damage reduction, increased movement speed, a crowd control break, and healing, all in one button. Combined with your high armor and magic resist, the percentage-based damage reduction from Unstoppable means you'll be taking only a fraction of incoming damage while it's active, making you a juggernaut in any fight. Now, let's talk about weapon masteries. At the moment, I've not had enough time to collect enough experience in weapon specialization to fully test all the different weapon masteries. However, I can offer some initial suggestions on how to approach this aspect of your build. Early on, I'd recommend putting your first points into all the ability trees, starting with Shield Bash. The slow it applies makes it easier to land your combos, which I'll explain later in the guide. After that, focus on getting Catapult's second upgrade. This ability is a game changer and will really add some damage and threat to your group. Finally, put some points into the Spear line for offense or the passive Iron Skin for defense. You also notice the weapon specialization bonus, giving each ability a small buff for every point you spend in its respective tree. As I continue testing and gathering more data on the weapon mastery trees, I'll be sure to provide an update with more refined recommendations for those of you looking to optimize your build further in the endgame. Next, I'll be going over solo, group, and PvP builds. Starting off, let's look at a build for solo play focused on leveling. When you reach level 5, you unlock your talent trees. If you're playing solo, I recommend starting with the Pathfinder tree for self-sustain and buffs, which will help you as you learn the game. The self-sustain talent in the first row gives you the best healing, but if you're familiar with Corepunk's food crafting system for health and mana regen, you could opt for Lone Wolf, which provides a 10% damage boost that will make leveling faster. Another option early on is Resourceful Explorer, which gives solid self-sustain. However, as you gain mastery of consumables, Eldritch Transmutation becomes a fantastic choice both for damage and damage reduction. In the next row, I suggest taking Flame Forged, which boosts your primary stat. This will be key for speeding up leveling since attack power is your primary stat. In the next row, Sneak Prevention can be a lifesaver if you're ganked in a PvP zone while leveling, allowing you to detect and take down stealth players. Finally, in the last row, I recommend Guardian of the Wild. This talent has saved me countless times, buying me just enough time to heal up while the shield is active. Once you're done with Pathfinder, the next tree to invest in is the tank tree. In the first row, Battle Harden is a great early on, but around level 15, I suggest switching to Retaliatory Surge because the armor from Battle Harden starts to lose its effectiveness as it unfortunately doesn't scale. Retaliatory Surge will give you a good burst of damage at the start of fights, which will synergize with some of our other talents we're taking in the Warrior tree. In the next row, I recommend Menacing Aura, which not only boosts your armor and magic resist, but also provides a warning when enemies are nearby. This can be invaluable in solo play, especially in the open world where packs of mobs can sneak up on you. Next, take Bulwark to mitigate critical damage. Juggernaut is a no-brainer for the next row, gives you a 10% HP increase, which is fantastic for defense and also synergizes with some of the warrior talents to increase our damage. Finally, Last Stand provides a second chance to survive if you're about to die, which is extremely helpful for any tank. This ability, combined with Guardian of the Wild, gives you a fantastic defensive safety net every 5 minutes. Just remember that Last Stand only has a 50% chance to activate. For your third tree, focus on the Warrior tree. Rampage Rush is perfect for increasing your damage at the start of fights, and when combined with Retaliatory Surge, you'll dish out some solid burst early on. Healthy Aggression boosts your damage when you're at high health, which also aligns well with this playstyle. In the next row, Executioner's Edge is great for finishing off low health targets. Life Force Augmentation works well with the extra health from the tank tree, boosting your attack power significantly as we get more and more health from leveling up or adding implants. Finally, True Strike gives us a consistent damage boost as enemies' health increases in higher level content, and as a Legionary, we have one of the lower damaging weapons, so the percent increase to our auto attacks is a very welcome buff. For group play, you want to prioritize threat management, utility, and support for your allies. This build will be good to follow while leveling up or at level 20 for most PvE content. I recommend starting with the tank tree. In the first row, Retaliatory Surge will help you grab threat right away at the beginning of a fight. For the second row, Protector's Presence is the best defensive option, providing consistent damage mitigation for you. In the next row, Bulwark will significantly reduce the crit damage from PvE mobs. Juggernaut in the next row gives you that extra HP boost, and Last Stand gives a 50% chance that you won't die every 5 minutes, allowing you to continue holding aggro and protect your team. The next tree you should focus on is the Warrior tree, which will increase your damage and help generate more threat. Take Rampage Rush and Healthy Aggression for increased burst damage at the start of combat, helping you grab snap aggro right away. Executioner's Edge boosts your damage on low health targets, which is great for cleaning up mobs after your team has dealt some damage. Life Force Augmentation will give you more attack power, benefiting from the increased HP in the tank tree. In the final row, True Strike provides a solid and consistent damage boost. If your threat generation seems fine, swap to Charge Catalyst. This can be a good option for increasing your team's damage. For your third tree, go with the Mage tree for mana efficiency and cooldown reduction. Start with Harmonic Trade-off for mana efficiency in the first row. Slaying Momentum provides cooldown reduction when you kill enemies, which is excellent for maintaining your tanking abilities in long fights. In the third row, take Arcane Insight to increase your cooldown reduction by an additional 10%. In the next row, you have two options. Aetheric Reservoir, which is ideal for most content, but if you need additional damage reduction, Aetheric Redirection can be very useful, though it will drain your mana much more quickly. Finally, Chrono Cascade will give you even more cooldown reduction, which helps you keep your abilities up and running to maintain threat and defense. For PvP, you'll focus on damage, survivability, and utility. The changes are relatively small, but can make a big difference in your success in PvP situations, especially in the open world. This will be the build I run most of the time, since it's capable of tanking PvE in groups while also being plenty prepared for PvP. In the tank tree, I swap over to Menacing Aura for better detection of enemies nearby. Indomitable is great for crit immunity, which will help counter players who rely on crit-heavy builds, such as assassins that need crits to proc more effects. In the warrior tree, I would recommend taking Anti-Heal to reduce the enemy healing, which is especially useful against healing-focused players or teams. The rest of the PvP build remains fairly unchanged, but may require some adjustments depending on the content you're facing. Let's look at optimizing your playstyle. Your bread and butter combo is simple but effective. Q, W, and then E. You want to start with Shield Bash to knock enemies back and apply the Vulnerable debuff. This sets up your next ability, Catapult, an incredibly strong AoE stun. Whether you're throwing an ally or an enemy, it's great for grouping mobs together. Once they're stunned and bunched up, follow up with Spear Throw. To make this combo even smoother, start charging your Spear Throw while kiting. This will give you time to aim and ensure you hit as many enemies as possible with the full charge. Don't charge a spear for too long, or it will cancel, and you'll have the skill on cooldown. If your initial combo scatters enemies too much for Catapult stun, kite them to regroup for a more effective AoE follow-up. It can be difficult in some cases to control who or what you are throwing with Catapult, but if you can try and throw the highest health ally or mob, this will help deal the most damage and threat. When fighting tougher enemies, don't hesitate to pop your ultimate Unstoppable right after using the Spear Throw in your combo. The defensive buff is short but powerful, and it's on a relatively quick cooldown. Use it early and often. As a tank, balancing single target and AoE threat is key. Focus your attacks on one target to maintain control, but don't forget to spread your auto attacks or use AoE abilities to keep the rest of the group on you. Mobs start targeting your healer. It's a clear sign you need more AoE threat. I'd recommend equipping Thorn runes to deal passive AoE damage and help maintain control of large packs. Communication with your group is critical, especially if stray mobs are causing issues, so make sure everyone is focused on one target to bring them down. With practice, you learn how to maintain control, deal damage, and kite effectively, whether you're solo or tanking for a group. Now for implants, another early access disclaimer. As with any early access content, things might change. For example, they recently buffed armor on implants, so don't be afraid to experiment and find what works best for you. Right now, the most important stat for implants is health. It gives you survivability and boosts your damage thanks to the warrior tree's healthy aggression talent, which converts 1% of HP into attack power. So sometimes a high-rolled health implant might actually give you just a little more attack power than an attack power implant that rolled low. So keep that in mind when comparing stats. Strive to reach a balance you find comfortable. With attack power implants, you want just enough to hold threat while still being a threat to someone in PvP. In regards to secondary stats on implants, you want to try and get cooldown reduction, armor pen, or crit bonuses. As for armor, aim for 1 or 2 implants with good rolls. Just be aware that there are diminishing returns on armor as you gain more and more. While it does contribute to your attack power through passives, it's really not enough to make armor your main focus. If you're torn between stacking more HP or armor, try calculating your effective health. This tells you how much raw damage you can take before dying, factoring in armor's damage reduction. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see my next video on armor versus health, where I go over the sweet spot you'll want to aim for at level 20. However, keep in mind this doesn't account for armor penetration, whether from players or potentially mobs. If the meta shifts towards armor penetration, stacking HP could be even more effective in some cases, since armor reduction becomes less reliable. Looking at magic resistance isn't too important right now, since most enemies deal physical damage. But that might change when classes like the Warlock are released, so keep an eye on how the meta shifts. You can see right now I'm running 3 full health tier 2 implants, 2 hybrid health and attack power implants, and 1 hybrid health and armor implant. What you want to wear is also going to depend on how well an implant rolls, so keep that in mind. For weapons and shield, there are a lot of choices that have their niche uses. Keep in mind, some weapons have a faster attack speed like the Tusked Steel Spear, which will let you stack our passive faster. So I recommend running that from a vendor when you can afford one with a good roll, or find one out in the wild. You can also swap weapons in combat, so once you have our 10 stacks, you can swap something like the Earthbound or Thunderclap Spears for more damage. The Ronin Shield should give you the highest armor and block chance, and as such is best for PvE. However, the 5% move speed reduction is something you're not going to want for PvP, so I'd go with the Ironwood Shield for the increased move speed, even though you lose out on block chance. As a warning, the Tusked Steel Shield reduces your own weapon attacks and not your enemies, so you never want to be wearing this shield. It's also a great idea to carry around an Ironwood Shield just for the move speed buff when traveling longer distances in the game. Looking at runes, your first pick should be Thorns, or if possible, the upgraded Reflect rune. This is the best option for solo damage and generating threat in groups. Check out my video on Corepunk's most overpowered rune if you'd like to see Thorns in action. For your second rune, go with Lamprey, or its upgraded version for extra damage and threat. If you need more survivability, consider the Wolf rune for its HP stacking, but keep in mind it requires kills to fully activate. Let's get into consumables you want to carry with you. Always have counterfeit painkillers on hand. They provide a big heal that can save you in tough fights or take pressure off of your healer. For the hardest encounters, carry Batch of Painkillers for even more healing power. For buffs, use Restorative Ointment and either Biosteroid Shot or Titanium Ointment. Biosteroids is your go-to for more damage and threat, but if you're struggling with survivability, swap to Titanium Ointment for the extra armor. Also a good idea to grab their upgraded version if you're doing content at level 20. Let's check out Universal Spells. These are great for niche situations and can really help tailor your playstyle. These spells can be a bit more of a personal preference, so experiment with them and see what fits you best. For leveling, I personally like to use Sprint and Mana Burst. Sprint keeps me moving fast when I need to escape or reposition, and Mana Burst helps with mana sustain, especially in those longer fights. However, when I'm running group play, I tend to favor Heal and Shield. These provide additional tankiness, which makes me more durable and reliable in team fights. Honestly, almost every universal spell has its use. Whether you need more mobility, healing, or utility, there's a spell for just about every situation. Don't forget, the game will keep evolving with future updates, so always stay flexible and adapt. This guide is just the starting point. This has been Deadman Fred with your unstoppable guide to the Legionary. Got any tips or tricks I missed? Drop them in the comments below. If you want more Corepunk content and updates, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Good luck, have fun, and I'll see you in game.